Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Walleye, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Episode 37 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Sabrin, joined by my co-host, Devin Little. We have some special guests today from Hockeytown West Podcast. And I'm sure our listeners are very thankful and that you don't have to listen to one of my stupid cold opens that most recently referenced rodent issues and falling on my face in beer league hockey. Let's welcome Travis Bach, Brandon Cook, and Nick Harrington from the Hockeytown West Podcast. Guys, thanks for coming on. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you guys came together to form this great show that you've been doing now for 2.5 years.
First off, thank you guys for having us. We appreciate it so much. We love what you guys are doing and love what you guys are building over here. And as Travis hinted before we jumped on to record, love the name of the show. It's so great. But for us, man, it was just, Nick was a season ticket holder a couple of years ago, and him and I were going to a lot of games, talking about a lot of games with the Griffins, and realized we have some thoughts. Let's put a microphone in front of us and see what happens. And then it's kind of spiraled from there. We started covering a little bit of the Toledo Walleye in that first season as well, because Sebastian Cossa was playing down there. And then through the hockey social media world, met Travis here and decided to integrate him into the show. And it's been a great addition. But yeah, man, it's been a fun 2.5 year ride of trying to figure out how this podcasting thing works.
Well, yeah, we're glad to have you guys on about that because we're still on the figuring it out part too. We're just finishing up our first season of Red Wings hockey and trying to expand and meet new people. And we're very grateful to have you guys on. I'm going to be honest with you guys. We don't talk a lot of walleye hockey on the show. And that's why I'm really excited to have you guys on. Toledo, as many of us know, is Detroit's ECHL affiliate. The Walleye will be playing in the Kelly Cup Final starting this Saturday, May 31st, with Game 1 at the Huntington Center in Toledo, where they will square off against the, standby, Trois-Rivières Lions. That translates into the Three River Lions. How did that sound, guys? I haven't done French since fucking high school.
Well done. Well done.
Way better than Brandon's from the other day.
Oh, yeah, way better.
Now, the Walleye have never won the Kelly Cup, but this will be the team's third trip to the Kelly Cup Finals. Most recently, they appeared there in 2022. I know you guys are fired up for this, and we're going to ask you about the watch parties later. But Travis, let's start with you. Talk to us about the significance of this Kelly Cup run for the Walleye and what it means for the organization as a whole.
Well, it's just crazy. Seems every May and sometimes into June in the last almost decade that they've been playing hockey, and they've been so close for the entire time. And I can't even imagine if they get this done, what it would mean to the city. Like, everybody's been waiting 31 years for this. Like, I made the joke last night when we recorded on our Kelly Cup final preview. Like, I wasn't even born the last time they won the Riley Cup at the time. So it's just an incredible run. And organizationally, like, look, you need depth, right? Like, organizational depth's a big thing. Even if it doesn't make it to the NHL, you need it within your minor league affiliates. And with Detroit, the biggest thing, like, we call Grand Rapids the big brother, basically. And they've really started to dip into using goaltenders down here kind of religiously. So with your big affiliations, that's kind of like organizationally the biggest thing is that a couple years ago, Cossa was here. Now you have Gylander and Bednar, and it's just developing players, right? And then you got Carson Bannell, Nick Andrews on AHL deals. And it's just, you need depth. And if you can start to develop it at a lower level, and eventually if they can help your American League team, it's only going to help your prospects when you start to bring in other guys.
I think that's like the kind of the underrated thing with ECHL teams across the whole continent here. When people think minor league hockey, when it comes to, NHL, they of course think of the AHL, and they kind of skip over the ECHL. But I love how you put that because, who do you think feeds the AHL when the NHL team is calling up this, this guy and that guy and that guy? You got to fill those holes somehow. And I think that, like you just said, we're seeing that a lot in recent years where Grand Rapids has been able to rely on Toledo to have guys to call up. And honestly, more often than not, they're calling up guys that are legitimate prospects too. You mentioned Cossa spending some time down there. Plenty of other guys have spent time down there as well. It's it's kind of an underrated program down there within the Red Wings organization, not even just world continent wide, but yeah, for sure. I do have one quick question, and your comments there kind of led me to it. The Walleye have seen a lot of turnover, and they see a lot of turnover on a regular basis. Whether it's players coming and going, they've had quite a few head coaches come and go, and yet here they are again. They're in they're playing for a Kelly Cup. Um, I'm curious, how do they do it? Like at the NHL level, you can see how a team is able to stay at the top for a while. Maybe they, make a really good trade. They make a couple of good signings in free agency, and then they're locked in for a few years. But ECHL teams don't have that same luxury. How in the world have the Toledo Walleye been able to stay at the top the way they have?
Well, it starts with a guy that, sad, and I was sad when he got let go, but with Derek Lalone, that's where it started down here. They were just kind of a middle of the road team for a few years, and then he came along and he started to build a culture here that really it's the reason that they're where they're at now. Like, it started with like guys like AJ Jensen, Shane Burstback, guys that were on ECHL deals, Evan Rankin, like there's so many, Kyle Bonus, like there's so many guys that, like, you may not even know these guys' names, but down here they're like heroes, right? And as that crew started to kind of overturn, you started to see like your TJ Hensicks come in, your John Alberts come in, and now you have Brandon Hawkins, and Hawkins has known Hensick since he was a kid. Tyler Spija's in there. Like, they just established a culture about 10 years ago that, like, we're going to be a good team. And the leadership core has been there every year. Alden Hirschfeld, I mean, he was a part of that. Like, he was a captain at one point. Now he's an assistant coach. So that helps too, when you kind of have a former leader on your team, seeing it for so long. And when we lost Waddy, like, we didn't know what to expect, right? And I think one thing that was very important is when they lost Waddy, like, they leaned on him. They also leaned on Derek, and that's where they got Pat. And when Pat came in, last year's roster was pretty well set. There was just a few fine-tuning things that needed done. And then this year's his first year kind of building out a roster. But it all goes back to that culture, and it's been here for 10 years plus. And that's the biggest thing that has stood out, and the kind of players that they bring in here. They're really good hockey players. Like, I mean, it's crazy to think too, like, you think the ECHL, you're like, well, it's AA hockey, but like, if you watch Brandon Hawkins play hockey, it's like, this guy should not be in the ECHL. They've got a lot of guys that have willingly came to Toledo because they're going to be playing in front of a sold out building every single night. And like I've said before, like, Brandon and Nick have seen it firsthand. When you get to opening night, it's like a playoff game, but it's like that for 36 nights a year. And that's just goes back to them building a good culture.
The other thing too is, I want to say, is Travis, last year with Travis, when we brought him on the pod, like, he wanted to do the segment of the Toledo Storm, and me and Brandon were like, all right, let's run with this. And we get these guys that have played in the NHL, that have played with Mario Lemieux, Jeremy Yager, Wayne Gretzky. Like, we go through some of these guys. So, like, these guys are coming, this was 10 years prior, and like, they set that culture that in there. And like, you just kind of, you're in amaze, and you're talking to these guys, and you're like finding out their story and who they're playing with. And that continues to trickle through. The other thing too with Toledo is the facilities. The facilities are amazing. Like, what they have down there, we've been able to tour down there. Like, guys want to come to Toledo. They want to play in front of 8,000 sold out crowd. They want to get those goosebumps during the national anthem. I won't spoil it here. Like, you have to go to Toledo because the atmosphere there it's unbelievable. We were checking out Trey, well, you pronounce it, Three Rivers, and their attendance was 2,000, 4,000 people. And it was like, these guys are not ready to come into Toledo, Ohio, get rocked by this fan base. Like, it's insane. It's crazy. So like, he mentions Brandon Hawkins. He was the MVP of the ECHL for 2 years in a row. We brought in Jalen Smerick this year too, like one of the top defenders in the league. He's kind of like an Eric Carlson kind of player. So like, we get these guys over here and they want to play. Some of these guys get AHL contracts and they get up there and they're like, you know what? We're not playing. We want the time. Let's get shit back down to Toledo. Let's play for Pat. Let's play for Waddy. I mean, the culture, it's crazy to be down there. I mean, I'm so glad we brought Travis on, and we were kind of in the middle spot of Grand Rapids, but it's kind of fun to watch Toledo, watch how it translates over to Grand Rapids, and then watch how it translates up to Detroit. So it's kind of fun to be in this middle to cover both teams, even if there aren't a goalie or a prospect out in Toledo. Just the fan base is just amazing down there. So I think it's just a huge part too of being down there in Toledo. Like if you haven't been down there, it's an NHL experience. Travis has said it before. Brandon said it before too. Like it's an NHL experience for $20. Well, not for this round, but for the normal regular season, it's, $20. I think Travis, you said what, $653 for Game 5?
Yeah, that's nuts, right? Like what Nick's alluding to is Game 7. Like the secondary market, there's a ticket for Game 7 for $631 on StubHub, and a face value cost for that ticket's $25.
Damn.
That's the kind of inflation you like to see. Holy cow.
There was an article that the Blade put up the other day, and they were like going through the most like famous tickets to ever hit the area. And they were like, if the Walleye get a chance to win it on home ice in Game 6 or 7, like what would that ticket cost? And it's truly the hardest ticket to get in probably Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan, maybe even further east in Ohio. Like Brandon's seen it the other night when he was trying to buy tickets. Like they sold out in the third period, and like the Lions hadn't even won the game yet, and they were starting to sell in the second period. Like, and now games 1, 3, and 6 are all sold out already.
And they've got, what is it, 80 game sellout? 80. What's the stat?
They're at 70. I think it's 78 straight right now. Every game this year was a sellout, and I think the last one was in like 2023 or December of 23 was the last non-sellout.
And the record's like 83, 85. And so I'm sure they're going to end up beating that record. But even like on bobblehead nights, people are lined up at 6 a.m. to get into the game to get the bobbleheads. Like that's how insane this fan base is. And I think everybody in Detroit, Grand Rapids, like it's just a quick drive down. They need to go and experience this firsthand.
I'm going to use that as a real smooth segue here. It is a really quick drive down from Detroit to Toledo, and it's not as quick of a drive over to Grand Rapids, but it's still a doable drive for sure. And then obviously the drive from Detroit to Grand Rapids, all three of them, that's a pretty good setup what they have there. I always think about like Carolina has the Chicago Wolves, and I don't know if you guys know what a map looks like, but they're not close together. And that always blows my mind that teams are okay with that. We're a little spoiled here in Michigan with how the Red Wings organization is lined up. I kind of want to pick your guys' brains on that. How much of a valuable resource is that? Not just for the Red Wings, but also for the Griffins, that the three teams here are within a 2-hour drive of each other.
It's huge. I mean, you see when Sebastian Koza was in Toledo, there was Red Wings brass spending time down in Toledo with him. And you see that coaches going back and forth. You'll see Dan Watson at games for the Walleye, whether they're playing against the Kalamazoo Wings in Kalamazoo, or you'll see him down in Toledo if there's an off week or break time for the Griffins, or even during playoffs now you see that. So that relationship is a beautiful one. I'm so glad it exists. A lot of people could argue that Toledo probably should be an AHL market, not an ECHL market, but I like the way it is and we don't need to change it. But at the same time, it's got to be a crucial thing. And as you see the ECHL continue to develop and grow, and you're seeing teams put more trust in their ECHL teams to develop people. I mean, Toledo was the first organization in the ECHL to have a full-time goaltending coach. That says something right there about what the Red Wings are trying to do and develop these young goalie talents that they have, like Carter Gylander and Jan Bednar. Like thinking of the future goaltenders that could still come through there. I mean, we were arguing all season long, like if Trey Augustine comes out of college, where does he start? Does he start in Toledo? And, there was the argument that might be the right choice. It might not be, who knows? But thinking of having that conversation with a top draft pick like that, does he start in the ECHL? A lot of teams would go, what are you talking about? And for us, it's like, no, that's valuable. So the relationship is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
And I think too, one thing I just want to throw in, like when you talk about signing your prospects to entry level deals, right? Like any player, like rounds 4 through 7, like it's a long shot for them to get there, right? Why wouldn't you want to use a team like Toledo that's stacked every year? They're playing in the playoffs. They're going on playoff runs. Like it was the perfect, like last year with Doucette, and undrafted free agent plays an entire season down here. And he played really well down here. And I think that helped him for this year. But like I said all year, like if there was a world where like Emmett Finney could have gone to Toledo instead of going back to junior, but there's that barrier, like that would have been a perfect place for him to start playing pro. And then by the end of the year, if he's in GR, great.
Yeah, so I wanted to come back to you and start looking ahead to the series this weekend. What are some of the key matchups, and what are some of the key things that the Walleye have to do to bring home their first Kelly Cup in franchise history?
Well, the biggest thing is probably just stay out of the penalty box. They've struggled with that, but they've managed to, you know, at 5-on-5 play really well. And that's where they've done a lot of their damage. Get back to their power play, what made them so successful in the regular season. Their head coach had said in a post game, like, you kind of almost take for granted how good it was because it was so consistent in the regular season. They were at like, I don't know, like 28, 29%. Like that gets to a point where it's very hard to sustain that level. But as you go on, I think the biggest thing is like the big thing too, like they go into this with Hawkins he was kept pretty quiet in the last series. And I think for him to see one go into the empty net, and I said this last night, like a goal scorer just needs to see a puck go in. Doesn't matter if it hits him in the face and goes in, or if he shoots it in, if there's a goalie, if there's not. That's a big thing. They have a line that Hawkins has dubbed the Hanson's line. They wear 16, 17, and 18. And it's Trenton Bliss, Tyler Spezia, and Brandon Hawkins. And it's easily, when it's humming, the best line in the ECHL. Like, it's not even debatable. You've got 2 guys that should be playing in the American League. 3 guys that probably should be playing in the American League, honestly. And defensively, they've kept pucks out of their net for the most part. They got to just get solid goaltending. I don't think they need elite goaltending because when they score, they can outscore maybe some defensive issues or lapses. And the biggest thing is, like, how long is it going to take them to figure out this team? They've never played ever. These 2 teams have never played each other because in the ECHL, you don't play everybody every year. And the Lions were on the verge of folding last year. Literally were about to be dismembered and not even be in the league anymore. And then this year they're in the final. So I think the biggest thing is just they got to play their game. Like last year, they got knocked out by the team that they just knocked off this year. And Pat said, we chased it too much. We waited to see what they were going to do, and we didn't play our game. So I think the biggest thing is just play their game and get the building into it early.
They're going against a really hot goalie as well. And so I don't have the stats in front of me, but maybe Trav does. But this goalie has been absolutely insane. And so being able to figure it out, and I made the reference last night of this is like Jay Shagir back when he played for Anaheim, going up against the Red Wings and carrying an 8th team all the way to the finals. Like that's kind of what this guy's doing.
Funny thing is, every round we've talked about like a hot goalie coming in, and the Walleye have seemed to figure him out. So I think it's a concern, but at the same time, it's a team that they've never faced, and an arena and an atmosphere that can rattle a goaltender very quickly. So as long as the fans are in it early, it's going to be an interesting time for that goaltender to keep up the numbers he's keeping going right now.
They just eliminated Florida, who's been into 3 straight finals. His stats for the entire playoff series, like the entire playoffs, is 15 games played, .944 save percentage with a 1.57 goals against. Like it's absolutely insane. So I don't know. Toledo's got some good depth. They got some good firepower. I think they can do it. I believe they can do it. But this goalie is probably the story on the other side, besides them folding and being in Canada and not playing. But Travis brings up really good points.
Do we have a series prediction? A non-biased one?
Oh, mine's completely biased, so I'll let Travis take that one. I said Walleye and 4 in our preview. Spoiler for that episode when it drops tonight at midnight, but I said Walleye and 4. I just have a feeling, but Travis, you can give yours.
Well, it's hard to be unbiased because it's like my hometown team, but I truthfully think with how they're playing this year, this is the year. And I don't say that just to say it. Like, there's a way different vibe than in years past. Like I said it the other night, in 19, it was like we were Cinderella and we went on this magical run and ran into the Growlers, who had like 14 American League contracts from the Marlies, and we took them to 6 games, and we were basically the ECHL team and playing in an AHL team. And then in 22, like we were loaded, unbelievable talent, and like that one was pretty disappointing the way it ended and how it happened. Like we had home ice and just laid eggs at home, and then won a game down there, and then had a bad collapse, and then the series is over. This year though, like the resilience on this team, and Brandon and Nick can both testify to this. Like there have been so many nights to where like they haven't had their game and they just find a way to win. Like the Fort Wayne series, like they were outshot like 36-12 and won 2-1. Like they robbed the bank that night. They've gotten absolutely smoked at home twice in this playoffs, and the next night they came back and they look like a completely different team. So resilience is there. They've got an amazing leadership core. They've got 4 alternates that have been there for, Jesus, it feels like 5 years at this point, but really I think it's 3. And then with Hawkins, I mean, you have a guy like that, and then guys that aren't even wearing letters, like Tyler Spezia. He's played in the American League and played in meaningful games, and Jalen Smerrick's played in meaningful games. So there's just so much depth and so much skill and leadership, and it goes back to that culture. I have it in 6.
I'm going with Travis with my prediction game, Toledo in 6. That way I don't have to go to Canada.
I'm still confused. But you can't go to Canada because you don't have a passport, or because you're not allowed there? Which one is it?
They both.
It's the passport for us.
They don't have passports.
It's not, we're not allowed there. We should probably preface that.
Are there any players that on the Walleye now that you expect to see up in Grand Rapids next season?
Carson Bantle. He spent some time with the Griffins this year. I expect him to be with the Griffins full time next year. When the Griffins had their 4th line rolling of Hunter Johannes, Gabriel Seeger, and Carson Bantle, that 4th line was special. It was just it was that power line, that excitement line, that true energy line that can go out there and really piss off another team. I'm excited to see Bantle return. I think the only reason he's in Toledo in the playoffs is because he played his 5-game minimum down there, and he was an available person to send down. There was a couple other Griffins that we wish could have also been on that list to be sent down, but we understand there was a little lack of depth on that side due to injury this year. But at the same time, Bantle, I think, is the biggest one, and I think the jury's out on what Trenton Bliss might do. I know the Griffins ended up signing him to a deal this year where he could go back and forth. I don't know if he'll re-sign an American League deal next year or not, but I think that's another one that could end up there.
I would go with Jan Bednar. With the way the goalies are, I'll probably get his call up. He spent 2 years down in Toledo, done really well, and so I would assume he would be up here. Carson, obviously, with the time that he spent up here with us, and then I'm hoping Trent Bliss, like Brandon said, is getting his time up here as well. So those would be my big guys.
I have one last question on the Walleye, and this is for you, Travis. And we all know you mentioned it earlier about Sebastian Kosa spending some time in the ECHL at the start of the 2022-23 season after he got off to a rough start in Grand Rapids. I'm curious, how can you assess how that move helped Kosa adjust to the pro game and how he became a better goalie because of that? What did you see in him in Toledo that helped his game improve in Grand Rapids?
So the biggest thing I can say to this, and the first year he was here, it was very similar to his first full season with the Griffins last year. You kind of seen growing pains initially, but then by the end of the year, he was lights out. Like, this is a kid that was super raw when he came to Toledo. And by the end of the year, at one point, he went on a 10-0 run with like a .76 goals against average and like a .950 save percentage over like a 10-game stretch. So his maturity and development was huge. And then playing in the playoffs again, they got to the West Final that year. You just seen it slowly throughout the year. Like, okay, the game's starting to slow down for him. And then I remember last year I went up to see Nick and Brandon, and we all sat together. And in the first period, I think it was Brandon sitting to my left. And I'm like, this is a completely different goaltender. Like, I'm like, Kosa, you can see he matured. He was way more fundamentally sound. When he was down here at the beginning of this first year, like, you'd see him swimming a lot in the crease, kind of maybe just, learning the pro game. Like, it's not easy. You're going from a stacked team to playing professional, right? Like, when he went from the Oil Kings to the Walleye, that was a huge step. But when he went to the Griffins, like, you could tell he was ready. Like, it was time. You started to see it at the end of the year in Toledo. And then that next year, yeah, it wasn't maybe, the numbers that he started out with this year or how he ended last season, his first year in GR, but development wise, like the calmness, just letting the puck come to him and not letting himself like do too much at times, or maybe just play more confident. And I think, like, again, coming down here, no rush, you're a first round pick. That doesn't matter. We're going to take the long game with you. And I still think it's the best decision this organization is going to make. I know Brandon agrees with me. I think them taking their time with him, because what was his thing when he came out? Like, super athletic, needs refinement. And it's still kind of that way to a point. Like, you see the athleticism, like him being 6'6", he's going to make some saves that a goaltender that's 5'10" is not going to make. Like, that's just part of it. But it's fundamentally just furthering developing his game, which you've seen at the beginning of this year. And at the end of the year, yeah, his numbers weren't great, but the Griffins in front of him weren't great this year in the back half of the season. So I'm not overly concerned. I just think starting down here gave him a stepping stone. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me, like, if you go back and watch on like the Red Wings YouTube channel, they put out like the waiting in the wings video of him. And he's like, I want to dominate at every level. And this is when he was in Toledo. He's like, I want to dominate here. Then I want to dominate in the American League. And then I'm ready for the NHL.
I think another key piece too, when we had Sebastian Kosa on our show, actually, we asked him that same question. What did that year in Toledo do for you? And outside of just learning to play the game on the ice, it was learning to be a pro off the ice. Being in Toledo gave him the opportunity for the first time, living on his own, trying to figure out how to navigate life. And that's something that's a really big piece of growing in this game that you're going to have to learn, and having that option to do that in Toledo, surrounded by guys like we mentioned, Hawkins, Keenan, other guys in that organization who are just true professionals teaching these young guys how to navigate pro life. That's really big for them.
Letherman too. Like, he had the ECHL's goaltender of the year as his partner that year. So that was a huge, huge piece for him to be able to lean on a guy like that when he needed to.
And you got to think too, like, Toledo didn't have a goalie coach at that point in time. So they were just sending Detroit's goalie coach down there to work with him, to work and refine him and get him going. So, I mean, being that close to Detroit helped significantly, I think, too.
Let's shift gears now, boys, and let's talk some Griffins. Grand Rapids lost to the Texas Stars in the AHL Central Division semifinals, losing 3-0. Kind of a disappointing finish for the Griffins, but we did get to see some of Detroit's top prospects, and Axel Sandin-Pellikka, Michael Brandtzig-Nygaard, and even Anton Johansson. Overall, can you summarize the Griffins season and tell us what players you feel like took that next step in their development?
Griffin's season, to summarize it quickly, is kind of the same as last season, honestly. It didn't really change much. The result was obviously kind of the same too, but it was with a much younger roster than you would expect in the American League. You saw a lot of guys being asked to step up and take some big minutes. I mean, you have Nate Danielson in his first pro season in the AHL playing 22, 23 minutes a night some nights, because that's all they had at certain points because of roster changes, injuries, and everything like that. So it was an interesting and fun season to cover for sure. And watching some of these guys develop in front of our eyes was a real treat. But it was also frustrating to not see them, go a little deeper. But their first test was easily one of the best teams in the American League, right in that first round. And I know we've complained about it on our show. The scheduling in the playoffs was an absolute nightmare. When you have a week off, then game one, then a week off, and game two. And I know both teams go through it, but that's not an ideal situation. And you look back and wonder, would the play-in round that you could play in the AHL made a difference if they played that? Who knows? But again, Texas was a really, really good team that's stacked with a lot of AHL depth. So a lot of credits to them, and they're still rolling through. They made it to the conference finals now in the AHL as well. So guys that stood out to me, I'm going to leave one for Nick because I know he knows how to talk about him a little better than me. But a player that I think a lot of people didn't think stood out, but did in my eyes, was Nate Danielson. I was really crucial on him at the beginning of the season, and Travis would usually have to put me in check and remind me, it's his first pro year. A lot of comparisons where Marco Casper's first year in the AHL, and everyone's thinking that, well, Casper played pro hockey before he came to North America. And yes, there's that ice adjustment and whatever, but he had that pro life. Danielson came in, exceeded Casper's first season in points, and was, like I said, playing massive minutes. There's still some tools and refining that need to be worked on for him, but I think I saw a lot of why he was drafted where he was. And, he had a lot of guys that were veterans on that team saying he was a voice in that room. For being a young first-year player, he was a voice and a leader in that room through a lot of the season. And that says a lot about him just as a player alone right there.
Do you think he's set for Grand Rapids again next season?
I think that's the smartest decision, if I'm being honest. I know Detroit fans might not love that answer, but I think that's the best decision. I could see it be the Marco Casper treatment where he starts the season here and ends up there. I don't think it'll be as short of a stint like Casper had with 2 or 3 games. I think you could see maybe half the season in GR, half in Detroit would be a potential, but I could also see a full season in Grand Rapids, really refining it. The one thing that I think I need to see more from him is I need to see him not playing with Austin Watson to see what he truly has. He was linked up with him for the majority of the season, which was a great lineup. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. They played really well together, but Austin Watson does what Austin Watson does and can create a lot of space for a player like Nate Danielson to go out there and do his thing, and also provide a little extra confidence knowing if I get pushed, I get hit, there's going to be this monster over here handling my business for me. Not that Nate didn't know how to handle his business. He picked up a few tricks from Waddy this season and was getting in scrums and even a little bit of a fight in the playoffs there. But at the same time, I need to see that separated and see him playing with some other guys to really understand where he's at this level. And that's kind of what I hope to see early next season.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Brandon here, I was not expecting you to give that answer, Brandon, of the Griffin season, because it was the shock of the season ending was very doom and gloom, and we haven't done our season ending recap for yet since we're still covering the Walleye. So we haven't been able to actually talk about this, but the stats are pretty similar to what they were last year. Goals, assists, or goals, and then goals against and points. We lost a ton of veterans, and then you put Nate Danielson in a spot that Austin Sarnik was last year. Austin Sarnik was a guy that was NHL proven, veteran leadership. And you had Nate Danielson, first season out of the Canadian League, holding his own in that spot. We sat next to a lot of scouts throughout the season that just were glowing about Nate Danielson, and we're like, we're not really seeing it yet. Like, the points aren't there, but I think it's something that will come next season. I hope he is here. Selfishly, I hope he is here again next season to be able to work on a couple things, and then to be able to maybe translate up. Maybe not the Marco Casper treatment, but maybe the Simon Edmondson treatment, where, halfway through the season, he's up playing with Detroit. He's back down, depending on injuries with Detroit and roster space. I think that could be a good situation for him. And who knows, maybe we buy out or trade somebody in the offseason, and that opens a space for him as well. So a lot of it depends on what Detroit's going to end up doing to be able to see if Nate can go up. One guy that I think you're leaving me, this guy, I'm not really sure, but maybe Amadeus Lombardi is who you're leaving me. So this, coming from the Canadian Hockey League as well, played in the O, it's a guy that I traveled back to Flint to watch, and didn't really put up a whole lot of points the first season. Kind of like Nate, didn't put up a whole lot of points this season. And then that second year just exploded. Yep. Put up a lot of points. Was injured halfway through the year, so he missed a considerable amount of time, but then was able to come right back and then go right back at it, picking up the points, picking up the assists. And then the other thing too is they kind of moved him around halfway through the season. They put him on the wing. And so to try him out there, which is probably where he's going to end up finding a spot in Detroit when he gets there, is probably going to be on the wing. And Trav is somebody that's been pounding the table for that since last offseason, and finally I'm going to convert and say, yeah, that's probably where he ends up going. So selfishly, I'd like to see him one more year here just to get some strength, and maybe not feel like, I feel like this season he really played like he had to carry the team on his back at a lot of points of the time, just based off the amount of injuries that we had and the amount of players that were called up to Detroit. So it kind of put a lot of pressure on him to put up some points to keep the team moving, So that's my guy. You kind of wanted to hear more about ASP, MBN, and Anton Johansson. I would say I'll pick Anton here for you. Came in near the end of the season with us, played really well, played really fast. One thing when we talked to Lars through our live stream is that he said that he does pinch a little bit too much, and we did catch him doing that here as well. So something he just has to get adjusted to with the ice size. He said that it was coached out of him over in Sweden, and then it seems like that bad habit kind of came back. But always first to take the shot, to take the shot. So we really love that aspect with him playing, especially with the partners that he had down here. And then just always physical, just putting the body on people. So we playing hockey, watching hockey, we love to see that. So that's the guy that I'll take out of those three, and I'll leave Brandon one of the others or Travis.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback one more thing with Lombardi too. You look at his first season in the American League, he played 70 games and had 26 points in a very limited role with the Grand Rapids Griffins, playing mostly fourth or third line that season. This season has to battle a pretty lengthy injury that kept him out of the lineup for a while. Only played 44 games, but had 40 points. One more than Nate Danielson, I will say as well. And obviously a lot shorter game time there. Ammo shows a lot of what you would hope to see out of him, but being such a late round pick that COVID year, I think the Red Wings have really found a gem here late. I do agree with Nick that one more season in the American League is probably needed to get that strength and physicality up on his end. But if he can still do that, maintain his skating ability and his speed and his puck handling, he's going to be a monster for this team that no one really expected when he was drafted. And it's just so exciting to see. And then, like Nick said, with Anton was an absolute pleasure. If you're a Red Wings fan wondering more about him, that's a name you need to start paying attention to. I think that kid's going to turn out to be something pretty special as well. And another name that I think people should pay attention to on the defensive side is Shai Buyam. I mean, it's a kid who came in this year, started the season injured, came in a couple weeks after the season started, and defensively sound for most of the season. I think during the second half of the season, might have regressed a little bit, but another guy that's not afraid to get physical, not afraid to shoot the puck as soon as it lands on his stick, and is another guy that I think could really make that step one day here. It's not next year. It might not be the year after that, but down the road is going to be probably a key piece of this organization. And, of course, you want to talk ASP, MBN, and all them. It's too small of a sample size to say, really what we're going to expect out of them. I think we all expect MBN to be in Grand Rapids to start next season. I don't know what to expect for ASP, honestly. Defensively, he's a machine. It's a lot of fun to watch him play, but I think there is some stuff to learn when it comes to North American hockey still. So I wouldn't be shocked if he starts the season in Grand Rapids. I know some people might have a meltdown over that, but at the same time, it might be what's best for him.
To add to Shai, he quarterbacked the power play for the majority of the season too. He started out on the third line and then worked his way up near the end of the season. So that was impressive, especially since we hadn't really seen anything like that. And then till ASP got here, and then he quarterbacked the power play. That was impressive as well. But hopefully most of the people that are listening have seen this already with the clips that have been shared out on Twitter.
You guys are setting me up for a heck of a segue, and I love it. Obviously, the Griffins lost Simon Edvinsson on that blue line, a big loss. But they also lost Albert Johansson, too. So it's not just one big dude. They lost Albert Johansson, too. He was a pretty notable guy for them during his stint with the Griffins as well. So my question for you guys is, and you've mentioned Buyam, you mentioned Johansson, Anton Johansson. How do you feel the blue line performed this year, given the losses that they incurred? And then maybe you can kind of speak on how that performance then translated to, the performance of the offense and the goaltending.
Oh man, the blue line performance was an interesting one. In the first half of the season, when the Griffins were on a roll, I mean, they were one of the least scored on teams in the American League for a long time. And I think that came a lot from goaltending, a lot from the defensive side, but a lot from the forwards being able to play safer and smarter hockey as well to keep the puck out of their zone. In the second half of the season, it looked like kind of what we expected with that many young defensemen back there and losing pieces like that. I would say underperformed is probably the right way to describe it this year. I think there's some guys you wanted to see do more. there was a really interesting part of the end of the season when, you do add Anton and ASP in there, and Antti Tuomisto was sitting some playoff games, and, or he was playing the third pairing suddenly after playing top pairing with William Wallinder for most of the season. And William Wallinder is another guy too that I probably expected more from this season. We were told those are two guys to watch out for going into the season, and I think they left a little bit to be desired when it came to their performance this season. And I think Nick will probably agree with me here. The most frustrating thing I saw on the blue line this year was the lack of William Wallinder being able to hold the puck in at the blue line, especially on the power play. It was something that it crept up on him out of nowhere and became a real problem, to where you saw guys like Shai Buyum and other players come in and quarterback that power play eventually. And which I'm glad the coaching staff acknowledged that and made that change. But it was a defensive problem that I didn't like to see creep in, because as soon as momentum started to go our way, that puck just hops around them and out of the zone. And here we go again, trying to set up, which was another problem that team that they had. They couldn't get out of their zone and couldn't get set up for a while there.
This team is interesting too, because like you got Dan Watson, who had played defenseman. You got Brian Lashoff, played defenseman. And so you expect that this team is going to be very good defensively. And this was my concern in the preseason. This is what I said, and everybody kind of jumped on me on it. And I'm like, we're going to really see what Dan Watson and Brian Lashoff can do with this young defenseman, because we have so many young defensemen here. And I think throughout the season, you kind of saw that we had too many options, because we had a lot of defensemen sitting and we didn't have enough forwards. At one point in the season, we only had 11 forwards. That's all we had based off injuries and call-ups. And we had, I think, 10 defensemen, 11 defensemen. So it's like, hey, can we just move one of these guys to the forward spot and kind of help out there? I don't know. So I think at the end, when we added Anton and then we added ASP, we even traded Torridello halfway through the season too, which was another defenseman that we had. And so it's just like, we had too many options, not enough slot and not enough time for people to really gel. You saw Wallinder, you saw Tuo together for a lot of the season, paired together, but then they kind of split that up towards the end. So the chemistry was just kind of off. And you could see that too, with like drop passes not being picked up. You could see just the communication style on that side too. So when you're adding people consistently, it just kind of threw everything off on that end.
And even with all that, they still ended the season with the 9th best goals against average per game in the American League. So it's, we could say there was a lot of problems, but they still performed, I guess, statistic wise pretty well, even though it didn't, get us where we wanted to go.
They only let in one more goal than they did last year. So it's like, it's really not that bad as everybody thought so at the end of the season.
I'm curious more about Tuomisto, and I know you briefly touched on him, but this is his 6th season since he's been drafted. Is there as a second round pick, is this a guy you think that is going to be on the Red Wings blue line at some point in his career? Or I keep getting Ryan Sproul vibes where the hype doesn't match.
I think he'll be on an NHL blue line. I don't know if it'll be Detroit. So I'll say that just bluntly right there. He's got the advantage of being right-handed. I think that's going to help him get to the NHL. Is it in Detroit? I don't know. He's such an interesting player. You see flashes of this really great player. He's got a wicked blast of a shot too. That's getting more and more accurate every year, which, in his first season, it was going 15 feet wide, left or right, or 15 feet high. Now it's at least getting around the crease where you're generating some chaos around the goaltender, shooting for that rebound. It was just lack of net front presence by the entire Griffins team at that point that really couldn't, get anything going. But he's such an interesting player when you look at where he lines up in this. And do I think he'll be in Detroit? I couldn't answer it. Well, could he be a trade piece? Potentially. Him being moved to that third pairing and even healthy scratch some games at the end of the season, that really had me scratching my head. Because at least, if he was solid defensively, if he wasn't going to be good offensively, he was good defensively, and he was physical. And he's a guy that won't back down from a challenge if one comes. And if somebody hits him, he's going to go back and hit the other guy twice as hard, which was probably in some cases why he got quite a few penalties that he had, a lot of retaliation penalties this year. And he had that problem when he played in Denver too, from what we've been told. But yeah, he's going to be, the offseason will be an interesting one for Antti Tuomisto.
I think the one thing that stuck out to me is at the end of the season, Yzerman brought him up and how he needs to be half a steps faster. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing, right? Like his skating is probably what's going to maybe hold him back. When you have the GM of the Red Wings saying that, like, there's a guy that's going to identify talent and know that somebody's ready, it's going to be that guy. Like, I think we all can pretty much vouch for Steve Yzerman knows when a guy's ready to play in the NHL and when somebody's not. And when he said that, and then they kind of gave Wallinder some flowers, I was like, it's interesting. So you definitely see it in a little different perspective. And it's nice that he brought that up. I agree with Brandon. I think, the three of us have said all year, him being right-handed is going to help him. Right-handed defensemen are always coveted for whatever reason. Because it's wild to me because it seemed like everybody when I played youth hockey was right-handed, not left-handed. But it's neither here nor there. And I think with him, it's just like Brandon said, big shot. But like, if he can figure out that half a step, that could be a huge game changer. All that being said, I think he starts in GR if they re-sign him, because let's not forget he needs a contract after this year.
He's somebody, I mean, even from the beginning of the year, I had a close eye on because the Red Wings are going to have to make a decision on him really soon. They're only going to keep adding defensive prospects, and at some point you can't keep them all. A forward prospect that actually comes to mind that's kind of in that same vein where you maybe have another year or two with him before it's time to make a decision. Cross Hannes, that's my guy. He's a guy that I was really intrigued by. I mean, even 2 years ago, I thought he might really be something. I'm really curious on your guys' end. What do you see from Cross Hannes, and what do you think his next couple of years look like?
Oh man, that's an interesting one. There was so much promise and like flash around his rookie year before his first injury that he had. Like the tear he was on right before that and being clutch as he was. There was a game that Nick and I could very well remember against Toronto where he ties it up with 10, 15 seconds left, goes into overtime, and he gets the winner too. It was one of the wildest games I can remember in the regular season for them in a long time, especially from him. But he's not putting up the points that I think the organization wants. He's a great player, great dude to be around in the room as well. We've had him on the show, fortunately, as well. And it was a really fun interview. We didn't even know when we were interviewing him, he was actually injured. We interviewed him and he wasn't in the lineup the next night. We're like, what do we do? And then he gets back in the lineup and scores. That tends to be a thing on our show too. We have a player on the show and then they go on a little bit of a run. I don't know why, but Cross Hannes, I don't know what his path to the NHL looks like. I don't know if he'll be in Grand Rapids again this next year. I don't remember when his contract's up specifically. I think it was this year, if not next year.
He's a guy free agent right now.
Yeah, so he's a guy I know the coaching staff likes. And, there was a point in the season where Dan Watson put him, Amadeus Lombardi, and Alexander Doucette together for a stretch, and that line was nuclear. They were tearing it up. It was the CHL line, as they dubbed themselves. And they were a lot of fun to watch. And it just seems like he gelled well with them. And you put him with other guys in the lineup and he just didn't gel as well on the ice with them. He's a good player. He puts in the work. He's always one of the last guys off the ice at practice and in warmups. But at the same time, it's just not really translating. And I don't know what that's going to lead to for his future. It'd be a shame to lose him. But at the same time, I don't know if he fits the scheme right now.
The season prior, like the running joke on the podcast was that he was just hitting a bunch of crossbars like the entire season. He was just hitting. So he was just a little bit off, like to be able to put some points up on the board. This season, the injury, I mean, it took him out for a little bit. That was not great, right? You want to have him a full season. You want to see what he's capable of. New system with Dan Watson as well for the last 2 years. So he's trying to adjust on that side. We go to practice. This guy is just a goofball on the ice, like just there, living it up, like making sure everybody's in a good mood. And this is during a time like we weren't doing well as a team, as an organization. I'm like, what is this guy doing? But he's just keeping it light. He's chopping up with the guys, making sure everybody's having a good time. This is like right. I think was this before or after his injury?
This was before his injury.
This year. This year. So. I'm hoping we get another crack at him this year. I hope he's able to stay healthy for the full and then putting the puck in the net because this guy is clutch. And it seems like every time he goes to play against Texas, his hometown team, he's filling the net. So hopefully it could translate this next season. I'm hoping we can keep him for one more, but who knows what the forward situation looks like at the organization and who's coming and who's going. And, we've already lost a defenseman this offseason.
Carter Mazur, does he make the Red Wings out of training camp next year? Or is he going to start in Grand Rapids and be the first injury call up?
Oh man. Well, let me just start with saying the Carter Mazur injury hurt the Griffins more than I think a lot of people acknowledge that it did. You know, when he got called up and gets hurt, they also had to call up another guy right after that. All of a sudden the Griffins were down 2 guys from that. And he was such a big piece of the roster. 2 injuries this year. The injury piece does concern me for what it looks like for him down the road. We know he's a very strong player mentally when it comes to this stuff. It was unfortunate. We did an interview with him 2 days after they got knocked out of the playoffs, and he was cleared the next night after they got knocked out to play again. It was just brutal timing there for him. Does he start in Detroit? I mean, I want to say yes, but I don't think it is. If you're talking about a player, like Nick said earlier, when you're talking about Danielson getting the Edvinsson treatment, talk about a guy getting the Casper treatment, it could be Mazur, honestly. I do believe he's on the Griffins roster opening night.
I'll say the same thing as Brandon.
I think one thing with him he's had so many injuries and he missed so much time last year. Right? Like you're talking, he missed a big chunk in the middle of the season for the Griffins. He gets healthy and then gets called up and gets hurt again. Health alone and how much hockey he missed, I think is going to dictate that he goes back to Grand Rapids.
Well, he only played 20 games in the American League this last year. Like that's not a lot.
He just doesn't. He just didn't have a season, basically. Like you almost have a lost season in a way. Like playing that little, you almost have a lost season. So is it possible that he could make the team out of camp? Sure. Of all of the guys that are probably the closest in the forward group, it's probably Mazur. I would say that. I'd say that confidently.
Well, yeah, he already played.
Yeah. But at the same time, like when you miss that much time, I think it's just go back, dominate for a couple weeks, and then come up, kind of like they did with Casper, basically.
Sure.
I personally think the Griffins that ended this season with all them kids is going to be very similar to the opening night roster outside of maybe Elmer next year. I think they run it back with the Griffins next year, basically.
I think that'd be a very exciting team to watch. And if we're talking about the Griffins, we have to talk about the big guy, the guy whose face is on the side of, or at least was on the side of Van Andel Arena. We got to talk about Sebastian Cossa at least a little bit here. We talked about him as a walleye goaltender. Now let's talk about him as the starting goaltender for the Griffins this season. Sebastian Cossa, in case listeners who haven't heard, is like arguably the most important prospect in the Red Wings prospect pool. Red Wings goaltender of the future. His season with the Griffins this season, at least from my vantage point, little up and down. Started very, very strong, and then for one reason or another, didn't necessarily carry that all the way through. Now, having said that, I'll jump out ahead of this real quick and say that Travis, your comment earlier about how just watch him for 5 minutes, he is not the same goaltender he was even last year, let alone 2 years ago. His growth, I feel like, is very easy to see if you've been watching him really just for even just a year. Boys, I have to know. Well, what's your assessment of Sebastian Cossa this season? And then the big question, at least in terms of Red Wings goaltending heading into next season, is will Sebastian Cossa factor in to the Red Wings goaltending picture at all? I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
Oh man, the big fella. You know what? It wasn't on the stat sheet. People are going to look at it and go, yeah, it wasn't the season maybe they hope, but honestly, the stats are pretty similar to the season prior. It was, I think Nick said it earlier, the team in front of him wasn't as good as they could have been. And I think that only hurt the numbers when it comes to the stats. What I see with him is, there's still some raw tools that he's working on, but that growth has been incredible to watch. And he knows it. And if there's a goaltender in the league that knows how to bounce back from a bad performance, it is this kid. I have all the faith in the world that he's still the Red Wings goalie of the future. Does he factor into the Red Wings season? It'll all depend, I think, on Yzerman carrying 3 goaltenders again. And if that's going to be the way they go about this, I think that's the wrong decision. I think it's the time where you got to go, here's our starter, here's our backup, and Cossa is the call up. And, he starts getting that treatment that Jimmy Howard kind of got before he got called up. And, you see a couple games here and get sent back down, kind of get that back and forth going. If you're going to carry 3 goaltenders, carry them in the American League where there's not a roster limit. That's kind of the smart way to go about this. And, we kind of alluded earlier to, I think Nick said it, Jan Bednar potentially being in Grand Rapids. I think that's a great move to put those 2 goaltenders together, maybe pair it up with a third guy that can bounce between the ECHL and the AHL, and you've got your goalie situation set. But Detroit carrying 3 goaltenders this year, I think would be painful to his development. I don't think they can continue doing that. They need to get him in games. And I'm not saying he needs to be the full season backup, full season starter, whatever. He just needs to get some games in Detroit. And I think that's only going to help him grow quicker. And, you look at the comparables out there. He was always compared to Jesper Wallstedt. Like everyone was like, we should have taken this goaltender over him. The numbers for Wallstedt have been miserable since his 1 call up to Minnesota where they left him in and get shelled 7-0. He's not been a great goaltender since that time. He's starting to bounce back from it finally, but he's still just as raw as Sebastian Cossa. And I think at this point, Kossa's outperforming Wallstedt. And you look at the other goaltender that gets talked about in terms of prospects, and Yaroslav Askarov, he's kind of at the same pace. His numbers might be a little better in the American League, but then he goes to the NHL and it's not anything special. He's really figured out that American League play, but can't seem to translate it. So, everyone always makes those comparisons. Everyone said we should have picked those guys over him. I would say they're wrong. I think we got the right guy. It's just maybe not moving as fast as Red Wings fans would have hoped, but goalies take time. He's so young still. It's got to be patient with him. And I think patience is going to be the thing that pays off the most with this prospect.
Yeah, I mean, you see Devin Levi, he took a crazy route to where he's at. And you got to be patient. I mean, I don't know that when he got drafted, but I mean, he's gone through this crazy channel to get to where he is. And you just have to be patient. I think one more year, just like Brandon said, is like being down here in Grand Rapids and then back up, or an injury happens to Detroit. You call him up. He's up there either backing up or he's playing the game. They have to be strategic too, because at the same point, you want to make sure you're winning games and you have favorable matchups to be able to put Cossa in to kind of ease him in. You don't want to have him going against Connor McDavid the first game, right? So you want to be able to put him in a position to succeed. And last year, I don't think there was a whole lot of points in the season where you're like, okay, like we don't need the point. Like, not that we don't need the points, but it's like, hey, we've got a sizable lead in the standings. We can throw them in. If we lose, it's not a big deal, but we get them the experience. That's what's important. No, like last year, we needed the points in Detroit. And so like, you're trying to get those points. You're trying to put the best goaltender back there. Not that he did bad when he was in Detroit either. Like you could tell he was swimming a little bit. He was trying to get control of the game, but at the end he got the win. I mean, I think that's huge to give the fan base some confidence. I think again, next year he's down here, he gets the call ups, and then you probably see him the year after. Definitely don't want to see 3 goalies in Detroit. And I don't want to see 3 goalies down here either, though. So that created a little bit of issue down here in Grand Rapids.
I'm also kind of curious too. Again, I'll speak for myself here, but I was underwhelmed by Jack Campbell this year as the other goaltender in Grand Rapids, and I wonder, I guess, if you're kind of with me in that assessment, and then also what. Because, I mean, I feel like Michael Hutchinson was a better partner for Sebastian Cossa last year than Campbell was this season. And I wonder what having a unreliable partner does, especially for a young goaltender that, it needs to be able to sit when he's, when he needs to be able to sit, floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, Jack, you can say, was a little underwhelming. I love Jack. Jack was one of my favorite people to talk to in the locker room. The nicest guy ever. So it's so hard to be like, yeah, it was underwhelming or say anything negative because he's just the nicest dude. But at the same time, yeah, there was moments in the season where you saw Jack come in and you're like, oh, what was that performance? And then there'd be moments where Cossa had to come in. Jack gets pulled in that game. And then at the end of the season, Jack came in and played some big games and won some important games for this team, especially when I look at some of those late season games against Texas. He was phenomenal in those. It was just very inconsistent. And you got to remember the beginning of the season, having Jack, Ville Husso, and Cossa in the room together. It was kind of pure chaos because you didn't know what you were going to get from Husso most nights, except for in the AHL, it was a solid performance. Like he was really good for us when he needed to be. But he'd have his nights where it was rough, and then he'd get called up in pure chaos, not knowing what was going on. You look at last year, I remember Coach Watson telling us that the goalies knew when they were going to play basically a week ahead of time. That rotation with Hutch and Kosa was set, and the guys knew where they were going and when they were going. And I think that really helped them in their preparedness level, and the inconsistency of the room this year probably hurt them. So, you look at his time in Toledo, it was between him and John Lethman. That rotation there, they both knew when they were going. Same thing in Grand Rapids. Obviously, Dan Watson was Kosa's coach in Toledo at that point in time, and then he came to Grand Rapids with them. So that was set in stone, and they knew what they were doing. I did miss Michael Hutchinson this year, though. I will agree with that. Hutch was good, but I don't know if is Kosa at that point where you don't need him to be paired with a veteran goaltender this year in GR? Is it time to let one of these other guys get a shot like Bednar? And I think that might be the time. Kosa's gotten to learn from two guys who've been through whirlwind careers, up and down, left and right, and a roller coaster ride all through their entire career so far. I think he's learned a lot from them, and it's maybe time for him to start sharing some of that with another young goaltender and get the tandem together like that and see what they can do. I think those two together could do some real damage in the American League, honestly.
I love the fact that you bring up Michael Hutchinson, Devin, because at the end of the season, I started doing the recap for this year and just to get the note ready. And I'm like, I wonder how much Hutchinson, because it was a true backup situation there. And then for us, we had Malcolm Subban at the beginning who didn't even play a game, but we had 4 goalies at one point. We're like, what are we doing here? So we had him. And then I'm looking at Campbell's stats compared to Husso's stats and seeing if that was any difference between just having Hutch last season. And those 2 goalies, Campbell and Husso, actually had better stats than Hutchinson did for the entire year. So because I'm like, well, where did this season kind of go off the rails? Is it the goalies? Is it the defense? Where was the issue for real? And I'm like, it wasn't the goalies. The goalies actually did their job. It was kind of chaos because you had 2 backup goalies and they're riding Kosa as the workhorse, really. I don't even know if you can say workhorse because he didn't really get as many games. I guess he did compared to last year. But those 2, it was a weird situation to have the 3, but they performed better than what Hutch did, or just on par with what Hutch did. So
there's a key element here with Campbell. Campbell was a 1st-round draft pick.
Yeah.
Sebastian Kosa is a 1st-round draft pick. Jack Campbell has been super high in his career and super low in his career. He led Toronto in the playoffs, gets a big ticket, gets bought out. If you want a guy to kind of have a young goaltender go to with questions and stuff like that, Jack Campbell was a valuable asset for Kosa to see firsthand. Yeah, maybe Jack statistically didn't have the season he wanted, but at the same time, Sebastian Kosa is seeing firsthand, it's a former 1st-round draft pick. Just saying, that could be him in 10 years. You know what I mean? This is very possible. Well, I mean, nobody wants that, but that, again, it's not every pick's going to pan out. So for Kosa to see and be able to ask Jack questions, I think there was more value, maybe not as much on the ice as there was off the ice.
100%. That's a great brain for him to pick, because Jack Campbell he's been around and he's seen some things. So my last question for you guys is this, and it's the narrative that we've seen pretty much the last 20 years within the Red Wings organization, is that people tend to think that the Red Wings over-ripen their prospects. And I'm curious what you guys would say to someone who pounds the table with that theory.
Watch the games. That's what I would say, because we saw Simon Edvinsson, for instance, we saw a lot of mistakes, a lot of issues, and everybody is we need him up here in Detroit. We need him up here in Detroit. And I'm like, he's not even skating hard off the bench. He's leaving passes here, open ice, just these small mistakes. And I'm like, I don't understand why. You guys can look at the stats, and you guys can say, hey, this guy got drafted last year. He needs to be up here now. You got to watch the games, because that's going to give you a better idea. And I don't think a lot of Red Wings fans are watching the games, or they're paying for Flow Sports. I mean, I wouldn't if I wasn't covering the team already. You know what I mean? So it's just, you got to watch the games. You got to tune into a podcast maybe that talks about them. I don't know if there is one out there, but maybe tune into those. So I really, it is, because it drives me nuts. I see it on Twitter all the time. This guy needs to be up here. I'm like, you should have watched his last game. He didn't do this and this and this. And you kind of see him, and like you get impatient too, because some of these guys like Tua, he's been drafted 6 years ago. Like, yeah, you kind of want him in the system. Carter Guylander, same year as I just lost the guy's name. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. I just told you this, Travis, today. Moritz Seider. He was drafted the same draft class. And you're like, why isn't this guy up in Grand Rapids yet? Or why is he in Detroit? These guys take time. You got to just be patient with them. Watch the games. Watch the clips on Twitter from us. Or, yeah. Brandon?
Yeah. Patience is the key word here when it comes to building, what Yzerman wants to build within this organization. You talk Yzer plan and all that stuff. I want people to realize that when he took over Tampa Bay, one, he inherited two pretty big pieces right off the bat, right? You had Stammer and you had Vassy right off the bat. But when you look at the construction of the organization now, and I, fortunately for me, being a Griffins fan my entire life, watching them play against Syracuse, which was Tampa's affiliate, a lot in the playoffs when the Griffins, were winning Calder Cups back in 2013 and 2017. You look at this build of the Syracuse Crunch back then, it is almost identical to what the build of the Grand Rapids Griffins is at this point. And Syracuse was a wagon for a long time there. And that build is starting to look very similar, and look where it ended up being for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously a wagon themselves. So the construction is there. It's just patience, because a lot of these guys that you saw move on to Tampa Bay spent a good amount of time in the American League. And, obviously they're going to have to acquire other pieces, outside the organization, because we can't have a single year of draft lottery luck to save our lives. So it's good. The construction might take a little longer, but patience has got to be there. I don't believe the over ripening thing is a thing, because Nick hit it spot on with Simon Edmondson. If he would have been called up any sooner, I don't think he'd look like the player he is today. I think it would have been way too early. Same with giving Moritz Seider a full season in Grand Rapids. Same with the amount of time Albert Johansson spent here. I mean, I know we're only talking defensive guys, and we haven't seen a forward really make that transition here in a couple of years now. But at the same time, that's kind of what they drafted back then, was a lot of these big defensemen to make that move eventually. And now you'll see forwards eventually make that same move. So patience is going to be the key word. Yeah, I mean, Casper's the only one of recent memory, obviously, but you got guys like Danny and Amadeus Lombardi and other players that are going to make their way through the ranks here soon enough. But patience. I know it's hard, Red Wings fans. I know it is. We all want playoffs, but it's got to be patience. And, while the minor league teams are in the playoffs, go enjoy them, get the experience of watching these teams play, because the product is great. The games are a lot of fun to watch all the way up and down the organization. So just enjoy it while we've got it, and let the build kind of play out.
Elmer Soderblom too, right? He's a guy that got a taste and then had to go back down, and is now looking like he's an NHL guy. So
people had him written off, and it was patience. Even in the beginning of the season, Grand Rapids, he didn't have the points, but it was the off the puck play that you don't see unless you watch the highlights, you watch the games, and then you understand why he got that chance to go back up and show that, he's NHL ready again.
Patience and Red Wings fans, two things are not alike to another.
Here's my thing with this. Like, it does take time, and we've preached it all year. And I get Red Wings fans are out of patience. They want the playoffs. I get it. It's been almost 10 years next year, I think. Like, we've said it countless times. Being that close last year was potentially the worst thing that could have happened, because it gave everybody a false hope that we were much closer than what we were, when in reality, that team was veteran heavy. Like, that was a pretty veteran based team. You didn't have half of these kids coming into the lineup that made impacts this year. And you had a 5-point drop off, and you inserted how much youth into the lineup? Why are we so mad? Like, I don't get it. Like, and anybody that once Yzerman canned, what are you talking about? Like, this guy hasn't won a draft lottery, and he's found players where he's needed to find them with picking where he's been at. This isn't going to take time. There was nothing here when he got here. The only guy that was here really is Larkin. I mean, outside of that, there was nobody else of impact, right? Like, you could maybe make the argument for Bertuzzi. Still think trading him was the best option in doing what they did. When they traded Mantha, again, probably the right decision. You ended up with Kosa out of that. Like, you trade Bertuzzi, you get DeBrincat out of it. Who would you rather have? I'm taking Alex DeBrincat every time. I'm sorry. Now, as far as the prospects go, when you're drafting like this, do you want to rush these kids in and become the 2010 Oilers where you have 8, 9, 10 early 20-year-olds that have nothing and have no experience? Like, look at Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He was on that team for how long? And he didn't make a cup final till last year because of improper development. Like, guys, patience is the biggest thing here. And when you have all these young players, getting them games in the minors is a huge thing. And like, I mean, everybody hated Ken Holland to a point. Like, towards the end, he didn't really handle development properly, but like Nyquist, Tatar, like at one point they were considered well overripe. And when they came to the NHL, they made huge impacts for the Red Wings. But I think there was just an expectation for guys to be they were put too high on so many players that these people didn't watch enough games. Like Nick said, they weren't watching the minor league games. It just takes time. These kids need time to develop. These are kids. Like, they are young people turning professional, and it's going to take time. And if you've seen what Tampa turned into after Yzerman was there, I don't understand what you don't see and how you don't understand the vision, because it's right here in front of you. You just have to watch the Griffins. And with being 5 goals worse than last year, how's that bad when it's majority of kids?
You can't win with Red Wings fans. It's either bring up the youth or play you can't win. So
no,
you argue to bring up the youth, and they bring up the youth this year, and they're complaining that. So it's a no-win situation. And I always say with the social media that we deal with these days, it's bitch, 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 bitch. My team's not winning. I need to point the finger at somebody, and I need to blame somebody. It's the people that will show the patience and see the long-term goals that can kind of foresee what this team will become, in my opinion, in the next couple of years.
And Travis can say that because his team's going to be playing for a championship started on Saturday.
Yeah.
So, he's in a little bit better situation where he can not be patient. But
you don't have the roster turnover we do, dude.
Yeah. But I think too, like, the one thing is like Michael Rasmussen. He's a guy that jumped right over and didn't get that much time in the AHL, and people were kind of clamoring on him last season, not this previous season, but the season prior. Like, maybe he needed a little bit more time to kind of develop and spend that time in the AHL, where he would be where he is at now, kind of thing. So, I mean, that would probably be one player that's like, hey, he should have been down here,
Philip Zadina,
Joe Veleno.
Yeah.
Don't get us
Those
started.
are some guys. Yeah. Ken Holland picks that should have been here.
Well, guys, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. This went way better than I could ever expect. You guys were awesome and so knowledgeable, and I felt like I learned so much today. The other thing I learned too, Devin, is we got to work on our background game, because I can't take my eyes off the Cosa jerseys, the Edmonton jerseys, your Hockeytown West podcast, the lighting, and then we got this bomb dim background here. It's just not. It's not gonna. It's not gonna sell. So
give you a small insight to the light blue Cosa jersey behind me. This is an ECHL jersey. Guess how much that went for in an auction?
$450.
He goes, I wish.
That light blue one was $2,000.
Holy shnikey.
And Brandon Hawkins has had some go for $5,000. So yeah.
I'm gonna spend that much on Red Wings jerseys.
Toledo's crazy. Toledo is crazy down there.
But thanks again, guys. This was really fun. This is plug time. Tell us where we can find all your work. Tell us about Hockeytown West Podcast, and tell us about this weekend and what you guys are doing down there in Toledo.
Yeah, boys, again, thank you for having us. This is an absolute pleasure. We've been wanting to do this for a while. I'm glad it finally worked out. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, everything at Hockeytown W Pod. And then this weekend, all three of us will be down at the Huntington Center for game 1 there with the Toledo Walleye. If you happen to come down and see us there, feel free to say hi. We always love talking to fans. We'll be there throughout the series, hopefully. I think there's only one game that we will not be there for, which is game 2, because it's a Monday, unfortunately. But everything else, we plan to be there. If it goes 7, we will be at every home game there. We're super excited to be in that environment, as we've said all episode long. It's an absolutely insane environment. This will be my first time experiencing a final down there, and I can only imagine what level those fans are going to take it to. Every time I'm in the building, they seem to exceed my expectations every single time. So we're excited to be back down in T-Town. And again, if you see us, please don't hesitate to say hello. We love talking to people about hockey. So we're excited. And as always, the way we end our episodes always is go Griffins and go Walleye. And at this point, it's really go Walleye. We're excited for these finals, man.
Our fish, our fight. Well, with that, thanks for watching episode 37 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. Hockeytown West, man, you guys are the bomb, dude. That was really fun, and I need to start saving up for a Cosa jersey. Is what I just learned today, because I don't think I can afford one of those anytime soon. So we'll be back next week with more Red Wings talk and more of Devin's prospect profiles. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.